I'm sure you're all familiar with the Carl Lentz scandal, the breaking news that happened 2 to 3 years ago. And I'm sure you're familiar with the B-Side podcast app that Carl and his wife, Laura, are now on. And many people say, well, why are so many people continuously talking about Carl Lentz and his wife? That story is old. Let's get over it. Let's move on. The reason I continue to bring it up and react to these episodes is because it shows specifically the power of redemption, the healing process, and grace and mercy, the endless love of God and Jesus Christ. So in this video, I'm going to be reacting to his healing journey, specifically when he was at rehab and the things that happened there. And most importantly, the redemption, the unconditional love of God. So without further ado, let's dive into it.
If you can't avoid as an addict, as a recovering addict, but it's stuff that you really need to be mindful of.
What I loved, what I wanted to do with my life, what I wanted to. So when we got to Florida, that was the best because I found someone that helped me with that side as well. But that's for later. But yeah, it was definitely a journey finding my
huge,
voice.
Impacting. I went before, so 2 days after all of our stuff exploded, I was so at Dino and Bob Goff, a couple men that have never left our corner, just made, somehow I got there. I don't know how I got there. And how I describe on-site, it's where they broke me in a bunch of pieces, then they just send you home.
Yeah.
And so
But you came back so excited.
I did, because on-site was where I found out that there's hope for me.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to get it done, but the choices I've made, they're my responsibility. The decisions I've made, my responsibility. Where some of the origin of the stuff that came from and caused me to become a person that could do that, not my responsibility. And I'll get into that in a second, but that was huge for me because at that point I was just so filled with my own self-loathing. I had written myself off.
Right.
And I left on-site going, I don't know what I'm going to do, but there might be hope for me. There might be hope for me, yeah.
The decisions that you make, the choices that you make, good or bad, are your responsibility. Are your responsibility as an adult. Now, of course, the decisions, the choices that you make as an immature kid, 9 times out of 10, it's not your responsibility because your brain has not developed yet. That's very important. But in Carl's case, as he stated, the choices that he made, the destructive habits that he had were his responsibility. He had to take 100% responsibility for those actions, for those choices in order to heal. Now, on the flip side of that, the things that happened to Carl, the things that have happened to you, the specific events where you were taken advantage of, unfortunately, were not your decision, was not your choice. So everyone that's still reeling through that and saying that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, I want you to ask God to give you the strength. I want you to ask God to give you the peace and to hold your hand through this healing process. Because you were made in God's image. You were made to soar. You were made to fly. And if you're still living, God is not done with you. He's specifically not done with your story. So as Carl was stating here, take those disadvantages. Take those times that you were taken advantage of, unfortunately. Allow God to come into your life and heal you from the inside out. Take all of those broken pieces and make a collage out of that. And get rooted in God. Allow Him to be your firm foundation. Because if we allow other things of this world to be our foundation, it's not going to be sturdy. It's not going to be firm. And you will find yourself in the same predicaments that you were in before, making those choices that you can control. Allowing people to emotionally hurt you continuously. You're capable of more. You're cut from a royal priesthood, a golden cloth that only Jesus Christ can provide to you. Remember that. It's very important.
I love my mom and dad. They're amazing. It just was one horrible situation with a house guest. As a parent, it's your worst nightmare because we've all been there. You trust people, and I was, and it caused a lot of wreckage, and I'm gonna use it, and it's, I don't know if I'll ever not be emotional.
I don't think you will.
I don't think I will. It's hard to think about what it was like to be lost before knowing some of these answers. And so you get to this place where you start talking to this kid. They make you write a letter with your left hand, which looks eerily like the age everybody was. And it just began a journey for me of being kind to myself and being patient with myself.
Because what you didn't realize was you hated yourself. I mean, worse than that, you loathed.
Yeah. There are parts of me, with loathing that I didn't understand because I dealt with the up and down of a compulsive issue, addiction, my whole life. And you just start to hate yourself. You start to hate that part of you. And then you learn you got to bring that part out, and you have to talk to it, speak to it, look at it, give it help. Repressing it doesn't work.
Right.
Hating it doesn't work. Using bad Christian doctrine about praying more does not work.
Right.
And that's where I found out I will not be a victim to the situation. And they start to give you language for that. And now I don't look at my as something that destroyed my life. I look at it as something that has helped me be a catalyst for healing in my own life and hopefully for other people. So I sit here today with years of sobriety as a recovering addict, and I'm proud of that. It's awesome. But more than that, I sit here with a whole lot of compassion. And because I know so many people have been through similar things, and they haven't had the opportunity to go where I went.
Right.
And yes, my failures were in public, and that is bad. It's very hard, but I don't know if it's worse to fail in private where nobody knows and you just have to deal with it. I could feel myself spiraling. And when I talk about a spiral, if you find out you're caught up in compulsive living, you can't control or you feel like you can't control your compulsions and desires, and it becomes a pattern, a cycle. And I basically told you, we were sitting on the beach, and I said to you, I'm not going to make it. I feel like I'm going to do exactly what I've done. And that's pretty much always been my cycle. There'd be a cycle that would include things that I hate, and then all of a sudden you go through the shame, and then the regret, and then the remorse, then the loathing, and do it again. So the cycle sometimes can be months in between some of that stuff happening. And I just said, I'm right on the doorstep. Like I know, and I feel like I can't control myself. I want to go somewhere to get real help. And you said to me, yes, I agree with you. If you do this again, there is no second chance. There's nothing. We're done. And I might even leave now. But I want you to know, I hope it goes well. And I think it's going to be something that helps you. And I'm believing for the best. And that was a crazy day. And I went to a rehab in Wickenburg, Arizona, that specialized in all different types of addictions and mental breakdown. And I went there knowing that I had issues, and I found out when I was there that I was dealing with multiple addictions.
Well, you found out first at on-site, I think, that you had
an anxiety disorder and chronic depression.
Yeah.
And that all happened at on-site.
Right.
So I came home from on-site knowing that I'm chronically depressed, unmedicated, have an anxiety disorder, and I didn't think I had any anxiety. Turns
Right.
out that I internalized it so deeply that it just became a part of who I was. And I found out I had some childhood trauma that produced some things in me that I did not see coming. And then so when I got to this rehab, it was, I mean, the drive from the airport to the thing is about an hour and a half into the dead of night desert. And you get there and you have to give your phone away, and they search you, and you go through a big medical examination, and they basically shut the door behind you. And I remember that day going, this is it for
Real.
me. Like,
Well,
I
and it
can't
was-
believe I'm...
And I couldn't
yeah.
talk to you for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
The first 2 weeks. So, and this was over Christmas time.
Yeah, and our
So my
kids are
first
still
Christmas-
wondering what's going on, and then I leave to go to a rehab. You're by yourself
I was by myself at Christmas with the 3 kids.
with the kids.
on the other side of the country that we just
Yep.
moved to.
And right before that was Thanksgiving, where we were headed to a friend's house that called 5 minutes before we left and said, hey, we don't want you to come anymore. So our kids were like, well, why aren't we going to Thanksgiving at this person's house? And I'm like, you know what? Our plans have changed. And everybody was kind of reeling from that. And that's still painful because that's more kid stuff that isn't deserved. Like I get
Well,
it.
Ava's talked about that. She
Yep.
said that during that time, she didn't know if you were coming back.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
she was how old? 15?
15.
16?
Yeah.
And so the anxiety, she started to have some anxiety
Stomach issues.
Stomach issues started from that, which
Yeah.
we didn't realize until a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
When she started talking about it, she's like, I think that's when I started to get anxious was I didn't know if Dad was coming back
yeah.
from when he went away in LA because everything was so up and like just
Yeah.
crazy.
Fast
They just
and crazy.
because Charlie had come back from her
Yeah.
hospital
We
stay.
don't live in New
and-
York anymore.
Well, yeah, after she was
Yeah.
done with the hospital, we left from New York
Yeah.
the next day
Yep.
and moved to LA. So everyone was just
Reeling.
it was awful.
So I'm in that rehab, and that place to me is
Can you
because
talk about sorry, keep going.
no, go ahead.
Can you talk about one of the most significant moments that helped you in rehab?
Which one?
I was thinking about you talking to your little self.
Oh man.
Because I think people think rehab is just maybe sitting in a room and like recover, like trying to recover from whatever addiction you have. What was the work like? Like,
Yeah.
I just remember you talking about this one
Yeah.
part that was very.
Yeah. Let me get there. I'm just going to take a breath. I think, and my tears still work. I understand.
They're
that
real.
Someone was asking, maybe it was my daughter, did your dad always used to cry when he preached? And were those tears real? And I'm proud to say they're real. I understand the question. I understand the criticism even. But crying was a healthy part of my life before, one of the few.
One of the.
And it has carried over, might even be worse. So my tears are my tears. They come out, they come out. I wish I could do it on command. I'm not that good, not that special. So you go through a thing where they help you dig into the age you were when that, and it's hard, it's you just don't want to go there. And when you first get to rehab, there's a bunch of grown men walking around with stuffed animals, and you're like, man, what are these guys doing with stuffed animals? They're like, oh, have you been to week 3 yet? I'm like, no, like you'll see. It's like Fight Club. And then we go through our own, and I remember as I'm sitting there with the therapist, and you do it with 3 other guys that are in your learning pod, after we start talking for a little bit, I remember grabbing my otter, like a stuffed otter, and I remember like leaving that thing after a lot of stuff went down in that session and walking around with my stuffed animal. And I would see new guys. They'd be like, what's with the stuffed animal? I'd be like, you'll see. But they force you to go back to that age where you were damaged and begin to speak life into it and begin to understand yourself and begin to understand.
God's mercy and grace is so deep, it's so wide, it's so high that I can't get enough of it. And although we're all sinners in need of a Savior, and we've done things and we've made choices, especially specifically Christians who profess their faith in Jesus Christ, we've all came short of the glory of God. but the redemption, the healing, the soul searching, the unconditional love that Jesus, God, has for us is like none other. So that's why I specifically talk about Carl Lentz, and I'm going to continuously talk about him because his personality, some choices that he's made are similar to my personality and my addictive mindset at times. And so I'm going to continue to talk about him. I'm going to continue to champion specifically for him, his heart, his healing, most importantly, his kids and his wife, Miss Laura.